Welcome to the immunity lecture, how our bodies protect us from foreign invaders. So usually we talk about foreign invaders as most commonly bacteria, viruses, and parasites, known as pathogens. So pathogens is just a general term to talk about anything that is going to not react well in your body. But don't forget there are things like funguses, carcinogens, pollution, other germs besides just viruses and bacteria, and parasites. Okay, so basically our bodies, they need to be able to tell what belongs in the body and what doesn't belong in the body, and then react to what doesn't belong. Okay, so our defenses, how our bodies defend us against disease. That's a good YouTube link, and I will post that in case you're interested in watching it. Any of the links that are in this PowerPoint, I'm going to post separately so that you can go ahead and if you want to click on them and watch them. Okay, so basically our first line of defense, okay, is we need to have a barrier to the pathogens. So basically we need to keep them out. Okay, so these are called our non-specific because they're generalized defenses, and these are systems that are defenses that are active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. First thing we want to do is we have our skin. Okay, our skin is a barrier to keep them out. Okay, we want to keep them out. So we have to have a physical barrier. Okay, very little penetrates the skin. Very little penetrates the skin when we're talking about pathogens. And then if you do get a rupture in the barrier, like a scratch, then you want to disinfect it, right? You want to use chemicals if you get cut so that any opportunistic pathogenic pathogens that are on your surface of your skin just waiting for a door to open up, that you can get to those right away. So use chemicals like soap, peroxide, alcohol. Also our tears, okay? Our tears are also part of the physical barrier around thin layers. Our urine, okay, so our urine is acidic, and again, especially women, okay, that's a larger area there. Men, anatomically, your ureter is a much smaller opening than ours is. So the urine has an acidic pH to also prevent bacteria. We also have our sweat, okay, so our sweat, and what we call inflammation that I'll talk about a little bit later. Okay, in areas where our skin is super thick, or not super thick, super thin, okay, we produce mucus, okay? So think about the areas where the skin is very thin, inside the nose, down the esophagus, okay, in your eyes. So this is for where places where we can't have thick skin, okay? So we need to have thin skin in those areas. Your lungs. Remember that your lungs, even though we think, oh, they're inside our body, they're exposed to the external environment every time we take a breath in. So that needs to have a barrier, but a thin barrier, so we have lots of mucus around there. Your nose, your eyes. Okay. We also have what are called iron binding compounds. Again, these are floating around in your circulatory system, and what they do is they take iron and they bind it, okay? They grab onto it so that nobody else can grab onto it. Iron is, why would that be a defense? Well, bacteria love iron. They reproduce very well when there's a lot of iron available, okay? So I kind of like to think of it as you don't want bacteria to have a great environment inside your body, especially the pathogenic ones. And so I kind of like to think of it as taking a toy that the bacteria would want, okay? So you take it and you're like, you can't have it, okay? So we bind it chemically so that it is hidden from the bacteria. So it hides the iron from the bacteria by grabbing onto it chemically and binding to it. A lot of times when you're sick, because your body is binding the iron, if they were to test your blood at that particular time, your iron count might be low, causing them to think that you're anemic. when actually your body's just binding the iron from the bacteria, trying to hide it. Some examples of iron-binding compounds: there's transferrin and then lactoferrin. So where do you think lactoferrin is produced? Look at the word, lacto. Okay, what do you think of when you think of lacto? Like lactating. Okay, that's going to be found in breast milk. All right, so let's say that you do get infected. Okay, so what is your body's generalized response going to do if you get infected? Well, the first thing it has to do is it has to identify the invader as foreign. Like, do you belong here or do you not belong here? So you need to determine, your immune system needs to determine, okay, do you belong in the body? Are you part of the body or are you not? So it's going to do this by, remember when we talked about membrane proteins? It's doing so by checking the antigens on the surface of all of the cells of the body. So those are the protein ID tags. So basically, every cell in your body always has to be holding up its antigen saying, hey, I belong here. Don't attack me. Okay. So white blood cells, those are the blood cells of the immune system. There's a whole bunch of them. Okay. Specifically, we're talking about macrophages. Okay. Macro for big, phage means to eat. Macrophages are going around. They're just, circulating in the blood, and they're checking cell ID tags. They're checking the antigens to see, hey, are you a cell that belongs here or are you not a cell that belongs here? If the cell doesn't have the right identifiable antigen, cell ID tags, then it's going to attack it and eat it. Okay? So here's an example of a macrophage. Okay, they're bigger than the rest of the cells, and it's going around and it's checking antigens, cell ID tags. Now, here are three examples of these non-specific phagocytes. Okay, a phagocyte is any type of cell that goes around and eats something. So you have a granulocyte. These often take a first stand during an infection. They attack any invaders in large numbers and eat until they die. So when you see someone have a cut that's got a lot of pus in it, okay, like it's an infected wound, most of that pus is made up of, even though it looks gross, it's actually made up of these dead granulocytes that have eaten themselves to death. And a lot of the granulocytes go after parasitic worms. Then you have macrophages, big eaters, okay? They're slower to respond than the granulocytes. The granulocytes are the first ones on the scene, okay? First responders. But they're larger, they live longer, and they have far greater capacities, okay? Macrophages also play a key role in alerting your specific responses, okay? All right, then there's dendritic cytes. Okay, dendritic cytes are also known as eaters, devour intruders just like the granulocytes, the first responders, and they also play an important role in activating your specific immune response. So those are your generalized responses. Okay, generalized. Now, just like we have generalized cops, and then you have specialized like SWAT teams. Okay, if someone calls 911, they don't immediately send out the SWAT team, okay, because that's a specialized unit or special forces, okay. What they're going to do is, if the generalized immune systems, the granulocytes, the dendrocytes, the macrophages, if they can't handle the invader, then they need to call in the SWAT team. They need to call in the specific invaders, and there's two different types, okay. We have what's called the antibody-mediated response. So the antibody-mediated response, this is the portion of your immune system that produces antibodies against the invader. So this is for when the invader is traveling through the bloodstream. And then you have your cell-mediated response. Your cell-mediated response, this is for when when your body cells have already been invaded, okay? So you want to take care of the stuff that's in the bloodstream before it can infect your cells. So that's what the antibody-mediated specific response does. And then you also need to take care of any cells that are already infected. And that's the second specialized portion. They work in concert together, the cell-mediated response. So for example, in this picture here, okay, this is a cell, and this is a bacteriophage. It's a virus, okay? And this virus, what it does is it's going to, sometimes they completely enter the cell, otherwise they'll just stay on the surface of the cell, but they will inject their viral DNA or RNA into the cell. And then that hijacks the cell and takes it over, okay? All right. Now, in your immune system, in your specific response, there's one key player that is involved in both the antibody-mediated and the cell-mediated, and that's your helper T cell, okay? So if the helper T cell is not activated first, then you can't call in your specific response. So it's kind of like there's only one person you can call to call in the SWAT team or the special forces, and that's the helper T cell. And it's only going to be activated when it finds a specific certain antigen in common. So when it does that, it's like a lock and key fit. When it does that, it triggers for the body to quickly start producing more macrophages, because you need them, and it's going to tell the antibody-mediated response, which we often refer to as B cells. They're going to say, hey, B cells, okay, B cells that match this antigen here that I've identified, we need you to start multiplying into plasma cells and start producing antibodies, okay? Now, these B cells won't do that. You won't produce antibodies against something unless that helper T cell tells it to do it. And then it also will tell some of those B cells to become what we call memory B cells, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So, in this cartoon here, here we have a dendritic cell that is presenting, okay, it's presenting a bacteria. Now, when it eats that bacteria, it puts part of the bacterial antigen on its surface to say, hey, this is, trying to flag in the helper T cell. So parts of the bacteria antigen, okay, there they are, goes on the surface of the phagocyte, okay, and specifically, in this case, a dendrocyte. And dendritic cell. And then the phagocyte, okay, this dendritic cell, will present the antigen to the specific helper T cell that they match, okay? And it can take a while because you got to find the right helper T cell that matches that invader. Once it does that, the helper T cell then becomes activated, boom, and says, B cells, you need to do dot, 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 and tells other, what we call T cells to come into action. Okay, so here we have, once the helper T cell has been identified to match that particular pathogen, boom, it tells the B cells to start getting into action. So this is what happens in the antibody-mediated response, okay? It's going to happen simultaneously with the cell-mediated response once that specific helper T cell has triggered them, okay? All right, so here you have your helper T cell that has been activated. Okay, it says this one fits right here. So the B cell that fits that antigen. Okay, they've got a match that will trigger them. Okay, the T cell though, it will wait until it's activated. Okay, so again, got to be activated by a helper T cell. So you're born with many thousands of different B variant cells. They're just sitting there in your bone marrow and just waiting to be activated. And how do they get activated? They get activated when that particular pathogen, whether it's a virus or a bacteria, actually invades your body. Okay? Each antibody that matches one form antigen exactly. It's a lock and key fit. Okay. So again, the B cells, their job is to make antibodies. So the B cell divides, once it's been activated by the correct helper T cell, to produce plasma and memory cells. Okay? Plasma cells, those are the ones that produce the antibodies. And again, they will secrete those antibodies into the bloodstream. And the job of those antibodies, they're specific missiles, kind of like a heat-seeking missile. Their job is to only go after that bacterial invader. And when it does, they latch onto it. By latching onto it, it prevents those invaders, those bacteria, from infecting your body cells. And then they'll also trigger memory, because antibodies, they're not in your system forever. Okay? So here's a few points about the antibody-mediated response. The memory B cells remain with you all your life. Okay? That's how you get immunity from something. So you have to be exposed before you can be immune to something. Antibodies without B cells, okay, remain only a few months. Okay, so then the body says, okay, we don't need these, start winding their production down. Okay, now the reason why you want to get a flu shot, okay, or any vaccination, is because we want to stimulate your immune system to produce the antibodies before you actually get exposed to that virus or bacteria. Okay? All right. So your body is going to react as if there is a live infection, increasing macrophages, producing antibodies, and giving you memory. Okay? Giving you memory cells. So, please remember, flu shots do not get you sick. Okay? You only feel bad because your body is causing you to slow down. It thinks you're under attack. So a lot of times when you're sick, when you're like, oh, at home, and you're laying down, you think, oh, I feel so sick. Okay, you were sick before, and the symptoms that you're having are the signals to your body that, hey, you're sick and we're fighting it. And we need energy to do that, so you need to slow down so we can have all the energy that you have to fight this invader. So that's why it makes you tired, not feel good, because it's saying, hey, go lay down and rest. So I like this cartoon here. The memory, the memory cell, whether it's a memory B cell or a memory T cell, okay, there's both. But again, it's like, I will never forget you. Because once it gets to know that invader, it will never forget it. Okay, so you get the flu shot so that you stimulate your body's immune system to the weakened virus particles that they inject into you, so that your body, again, you get the memory, and you have the antibodies and the memory, so that when flu season, you should get your flu shot before flu season hits. And flu season, influenza, for us is like in January. Okay, so you want to give your body time to build up the antibodies and the memory, so that you will be immune when you get exposed when the flu hits. Okay, this is a pretty cool video. It only is 5 minutes long, and it talks about how the first vaccines, they were used by the Egyptians. And it's really interesting, and then how we developed the first vaccine. Okay, so now while the B cells are getting stimulated, okay, to take care of invaders from infecting more cells, we need to take care of the cells that are already infected. So that's what the cell-mediated response does. And so again, when a virus invades a cell, their genetic material is going to go into the cell, but they leave portions of their protein capsule outside as a marker that, hey, this doesn't belong here. So now your body cell that's infected is showing two antigens, your cell ID tag and the viral cell ID tag. Okay, so it's got both on there. So a macrophage, which is part of the generalized immune response, they're confused because they're like, okay, I see your ID tag, so you should be here, but then there's this ID tag as well that I don't know what to do. I'm not going to destroy you because I'm confused and I don't want to attack a body cell when I'm not supposed to. Okay? All right, so they're going to be confused. We need to have somebody else come in and take care of those. Okay? So something else will take care of those cells of your own body that are infected, presenting both antigens. And they are called the killer T cells, okay? Cytotoxic cells, cytotoxic killer T cells. So they're like the Terminator. So hopefully you guys know the Terminator movie series, okay? In the original one, the Terminator, he was sent here for one specific job. And that one specific job of his was to kill Sarah Connor, okay? Because Sarah Connor was supposed to, she was the one that had John, that, the whole Terminator thing, okay? So he gets to Earth, right? Okay, back in time. Okay, he gets there. And the first thing he has to do, because, in the time travel, that they come in naked. So he got some clothes, he got some guns, and then he had to find Sarah Connor. Oh, and he got a motorcycle for mode of transportation. Then he went to a payphone, payphone booth. I remember these. Went to the payphone booth and pulled up from below the payphone booth, boom, the phone book, okay? Because back in the day, phone books used to be hanging from a cable in the phone booths, and you would and open it up to try and find a phone number for somebody and hope that somebody hadn't ripped out the page. Anyway, so the Terminator, boom, okay, opens it up, sees Sarah Connor. And there's like 3 or 4 Sarah Connors, so he scans their names and their addresses, okay? And what's he do? Goes to the first one. Sarah Connor. Oh, yes, hi, I'm Sarah Connor. Boom, destroys her, right? And then he goes, okay? Because that's his job. He's looking to destroy only Sarah Connor. All right, so that's what killer T cells do, okay? They're looking for Sarah Connor cells. And in your body, the Sarah Connor cells are the cells that are infected by that pathogen, okay? So the killer T cell, whether it's cancer cells have our cell ID tag and an incorrect ID tag, or a cell infected by a virus, okay? They just destroy them, okay? They destroy them. So here is an example of a killer T cell in action, okay? So the killer T cell attacks an infected cell that's presenting with the influenza antigen. Also in cancer cells, again, if they're dividing quickly, they often miscopy their antigens, and the killer T cells destroy them, okay? Again, the macrophage won't, because the macrophage is confused by seeing your body's antigen, whether it's correct or incorrect. Okay. So the study of pathogens is called, or diseases, is called epidemiology. And epidemiologists, okay, they're relating the size of 3 pools in a population, 3 pools of the human population. Basically, they want to see people who have never had the disease. So what portion of the population have never had the disease? Because if you've never had the disease, you've never been exposed to it, right, you don't have any immunity from it. Then they want to see how many portion of the population is infected, okay, actively infected at the moment. And then they want to compare that to people who have had the disease, recovered, and are now immune. Okay? They want to, they're constantly studying the proportion of those 3 parts of the population. Which pool size proportions scare epidemiologists the most, okay? It would be 2 and 1, comparing 2 and 1. Because if you have a large population of the poor population who have never had the disease, let's say it's like 50-50, and then a portion of the population that's infected, that's scary. Oh, and that there's a very small portion of the people who have had the disease, recovered, and then are immune. Okay, so if 1 and 2 are much larger than 3, that's really scary, because that's telling epidemiologists that it's a very virulent or powerful, deadly infection. Okay, so what kind of factors affect how fast a disease can spread, is passed on? Okay, well, the first thing is the degree of contact between members in a population. So basically, how much exposure you have to others. So remember when the whole Ebola crisis was going on. I had like 2 years ago or 2 summers ago. And so basically it was, we didn't really worry about it here because it was going on in Nigeria. And then, so we didn't have any degree of contact between the members of the population that had it and those of us that didn't. Then when it made it to the United States, okay, large cities, right, okay, you have a much higher degree of contact with members of the population than if you live in a rural area. The communicability, how easily it is to pass from one person to another. So basically, like think of hepatitis C, which is transmitted by bodily fluids, okay, blood, sex, okay, things like that, sexual fluids. So if someone has hepatitis C, and you're not sharing any kind of bodily fluids with them, then your communicability is low. Okay, so as compared to whether it is passed on through food, spittle, like kissing, like mono, okay, or if it's airborne, then that's really scary. Okay, and then how fatal the disease is. How fast does it? Does it kill somebody, and how fast does it do it? So, talking about AIDS, okay, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. So remember, acquired means it's not genetic, okay? You cannot genetically pass on AIDS to somebody else. Now, yes, a pregnant woman can pass it on to the fetus. Again, that's not genetic, it's because they're sharing the same bloodstream. Okay. All right. Again, it's acquired, not genetic. Immune deficiency because it's wiping out your immune system. And it's a syndrome because it's characterized by a suite of symptoms. Now, why is it an immune deficiency? Because the cell that the HIV virus attacks is the linchpin of your immune system, the helper T cell. When HIV drops your T cell levels to a specific number, then because it's destroyed them, then that's when they'll classify somebody as going from just being HIV positive to being classified as having AIDS. So, how to prevent the spread of the HIV vaccination, or the HIV virus, which leads to AIDS? Well, we want to prevent infection, just like the same thing with any pathogen. We want to prevent being infected from it. So with HIV, you need to reduce your degree of contact with individuals. So since it's pretty much most commonly sexually transmitted, then the only true way to protect yourself is to be abstinent. Okay, which means no sexual contact at all, oral, anal, vaginal. Reduce your number of partners. Okay, reduce your number of partners. Yes, but there are plenty of people that thought they were in monogamous relationships that ended up being HIV positive because who they thought they were being monogamous with wasn't being monogamous. Choose less promiscuous partners. Reduce the communicability. Okay, so if you are going to engage in activities that are going to swap bodily fluids, wearing a condom, a barrier. Remember that HIV is non-virulent. It's very slow. There are individuals that have been living with being HIV for 15, 20 years. So it can be passed on for a long time without being symptomatic. This is a good video just on, it's kind of technical, but it does go through the cycle of how the HIV virus infects individuals. Okay, so I do want to go back to